Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And here we are. I'm going to share the screen. Okay. So, of course, what's happened is we've seen how God allowed or blessed the Jewish people and helped them to prosper and overcome the enemies and really be in a good place. And instead of showing any appreciation, the Israelites did just the opposite. They started to follow false gods, etc. And there are consequences. That is the very notion and the foundation of so much, is that there are consequences. So, Vayar Hashem vayinatz. And Hashem saw what the people were doing, and he became enraged. Mikas panav, from the grief caused by his children, by his sons, Uvnotav, and his daughters. That there is a universal level of grief, that our behavior has an effect on the universe around us, and that going and doing what we were doing was creating this situation. Vayomer, and he said, that is to say, he thought, Astira fanai mehem. So this is this concept of hastarat panim, which means to hide his face. In other words, he thought to hide his face from them. And that is for us to recognize that so many things that happen in the process of our lives are happening because God is making it possible to happen. And that when there's hastarat panim, it just means that our lives become topsy-turvy and just, we've rejected God and God is rejecting us. That's kind of the way it's working. So, I will see, ma acharitam, what is going to be their end, what is going to be their future. Kidor tapuchot hema, for they are a generation of perverseness or perverse behavior. Banim lo emun ban, children, sons, without there is no faithfulness within them. So ma'achritam, what is their end? Ma ta'aleh bahem besofam, what will come up to them in the end? In other words, what the consequences will be of that behavior. Kidor tapuchot hema. So there's this word lahafoch, means to turn over, to turn over. So in what sense is it a generation of turning over? Mahavchin rotzono lachas. That is to say, they are turning over his desire into anger, or to turning over being able to act with according to divine will and turning it into anger. Lo emun ban. So he looks at this word emun, and you can see that it looks quite a bit like the word amen. Amen, right? So let's see how to analyze this. En giduli nikarim bahem. So he's saying, so la amen can also mean to train in some way. So it's saying, my training is not recognized amongst them, how I've trained them. Here's how it happens. Ki horitim derech Torah, because I have taught them a good way, a good path, the saru mimenu, and they turned away from it. So emun, lashon, from Esther, Milah, chapter 2, where it talks about Mordechai being Omein. He was her caretaker, her caregiver. And here's this French word, nourriture. So nourriture in French, tzihung, which means like to provide or to train or to nurture. There we go. There's that word, nurture. Davar acher, another interpretation. Emun, lashon emunah. So we could say that emun has to do with the meaning of emunah, faithfulness. Ketargumo, as is the way the Targum has Onkelos understands it. Here's they're not faithful. Amru b'Sinai, at Mount Sinai they said Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will understand. And of course the whole idea of acting and performing and then understanding better. V'lasha'a kala, and in a brief moment, batlu haftachatam, they just turned aside their promise. They reneged on their promise, the Asu Ha'egel, and they went ahead and made the golden calf. Haim kinuni belo el, they provoked me with a no God. Ki asuni bahav lehem, they angered me with their worthless practices, with their vanities, evel habalim. Va'ani akniem ben lo am, and I will anger them, right, with a no people. We'll explain that in a moment. Rashi will explain that. Begoy naval, with a vile nation. Achisem, again, I will anger them. So I'll provoke them, I will anger them. Kin uni. So they provoked me. Iru hamati, they caused my anger to flare up. Below el, with a no God, bedavar she'eno Eloha, in worshiping things that in fact are not gods. And of course, this, for us these days, trying to understand what it means to worship something, right? In other words, to attribute to it value, tremendous value, and its ability to give us assistance to save our lives, etc., etc. That's all involved in, ultimately, in worship has to do with giving it a value that is beyond, let's say, normal. The lo'am, with a no people. What do we mean by that? The ovdei chalim, in other words, idolaters, she'ein lahem shem, who have no reputation. Kamosh ne'emar, as it states, this is in Isaiah, hein eretz kastim zeh, behold, this land of the Chaldees, ha'am lo haya, eretz kastim, she'ne'emar, hein eretz kastim, these are the lands of the Chaldees. Zeha'am lohaya. This nation never was a founded nation. And the Sefaria explains there's some brief commentary within the translation of the Rashi there, and essentially the context in this Isaiah is because the Assyrians founded it. That's how we understand it. In other words, we need to know that the way the Assyrians managed their conquests to make sure that they could reduce the possibility of rebellion as much as possible, what they did was they took nations and blended them. They took people and spread them throughout their empire. That's what they did with the 10 northern tribes of Israel, and that's why they wanted to destroy a sense of identity there. And that's the Lo'am here. Esav, and regarding Esau, who Omer states, and this is in Ovadia, and the prophet Ovadia, Bizui atamaod, you are greatly dishonored. And this prophecy of Ovadia is primarily to Edom, to the descendants of Esau. The Goy Naval Achisem, with a vile nation I will anger them or frustrate them. Ela, what are we referring to? Ela HaKofrim, we're referring to heretics, V'chein hu omer, and so it says, so when it says Naval, it's referring to their heresy, okay, people acting in heretical manner. And so it says, Rashi gives us some support here in Psalm 14, Amar Naval Belibo, said the vile person in his heart, Ein Elohim, there is no God. So this is understood as being, of course, heresy and the idea of a lack of appreciation, not recognizing where these blessings spring. Ki esh kadcha ba'api, for a fire is ignited. It means in my nose, in my nostrils. In other words, that because often, when the idea of nostrils flaring out of anger, Vatikad ad sheol tachtit, and it burns to the bottommost area of Sheol, the deep, the netherworld, right? Vatochal eretz vivula, it consumes the land and its produce. Vatalahet mostei harim, and it causes the foundations of the hills to glow, to burn. Interesting description here. Kadcha, so this kadach is be'era, in other words, it inflamed, right? It burned. Vatikad bachem ad hayesod. So he gives an example of this vatikad, right? This to burn until its foundation. It's just he's describing the destruction that comes from moving away from this sense of what our purpose is as human beings. Vatochal eretz vivula, and it consumes the land and its produce. Artzachem vivula, meaning when it says land, it means your land and its produce, all the fruit of it, of the soil, etc. Vatalahet, to cause to glow. Yerushalayim, so we're talking about Jerusalem, is going to be burned. Hamiyusedet al Ha'arim, which is founded upon the hills, the mountains, Shne'emar, as it states in Psalm 125, Yerushalayim, as for Jerusalem, Harim Saviv La, the hills surround it. Asfer alemu ra'ot, I will gather a sweep against it, evil. Chitzai achale, my arrows, achale bam, I will waste away, or excuse me, I will polish off my arrows in them, right? I will end. Basically, kala means to end them. In other words, use up all my arrows against them. Okay, asfer alemu raot. So, asfer. So what's this word asfer? He says, achbir. I will connect ra al ra. In other words, I will connect one evil to another evil. In other words, just unending bad things happening. Lashon, and this has the same meaning in the prophet Isaiah 29. Safu shana al shana, add one year to the next, right? Add it 1 year after the other. And then also it says, this is, I think when it says La'el Kaftet, it means chapter 29 in Deuteronomy. Sfot Harava, right? This is from that, in this particular chapter, it uses the word sfot, to add drunkenness to your thirst. Yirmiyahu Zion, and in Jeremiah chapter 7, Olotechem safu al zivchechem, add your whole offerings to your sacrifices. And Jeremiah there is saying that, one on top of the other, it's not going to make a difference. That just offering up sacrifices, but not changing one's behavior and how one is acting isn't going to make any difference. Sacrifices are not going to make up for that. Davar acher, another interpretation. Asfer, as to the word asfer, achale means I will bring to an end. And we have an example, pen tispe, lest it come to an end. Chitzai achalebam. All right, my arrows, I will end with them. I'll use up all my arrows against them. Kol chitzai, all my arrows, ashlim bahem, I will finish off. I will use up all my arrows with them, against them. Uklala zo, and as far as this particular curse, the fiha puranut, according to the adversity, according to the punishment, livrachahi, it actually can be understood as a blessing. That is to say, chitzai kalim, that is, my arrows come to an end, vehem einam kalim, but they do not come to an end. And I'm going to stop here and wish you a very happy Shana Tova. So, mark the place. Okay. All right. Let me stop the share and see if any of you have any comments you'd like to make at this point. It's in some ways, of course, unnerving. And I was thinking of the fact that, of course, there's a reason why they say Talmud Torah Keneged Chulam, that, that studying Torah is about it all, because otherwise one is just unaware of these particular dynamics. So let's just hope for the best. I know that ultimately the prophets, speak very positively about the end, and there certainly are some positive signs as well. And so I'm hoping that we will manage. It's a shame in a way that in the midst of our prosperity, we turn away from religion and we turn away from spiritual things. And perhaps it's understandable, because our lives are filled with material benefits. So at this particular season especially, it's a good time to think of it. And I'm going to stop the recording.